My name is Guy Harrington, 68 years old, and I never expected to get that call from my daughter, Amanda. After 30 years of owning my beautiful beach house in Clearwater, Florida, I was stunned when she called me out of the blue. Her voice was cold and businesslike as she said, "We're going tomorrow, Dad. I've sold your beach house." I felt my heart stop for a moment before a strange calm washed over me. What Amanda didn't realize was that she'd made one critical mistake. Before you hear what happened next in this family property drama, take a moment to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from today. I was born in Boston back in 1957. My father was a hard-working plumber who believed in the value of education, so I worked my way through college and eventually became an architect. I was good at what I did, designing commercial buildings across New England for over 40 years. My career brought me satisfaction, financial stability, and respect in the industry. Margaret and I met during my third year of architecture school. She was studying literature, with dreams of teaching. We married 2 years after graduation and built a life together in Maine, where I established my practice. Margaret was my anchor, my voice of reason, and my greatest supporter. We had 2 children, Amanda and Jack, who grew up in a comfortable home filled with books, blueprints, and laughter. 5 years ago, Margaret lost her battle with ovarian cancer. The disease took her quickly, only 6 months from diagnosis to her final day. I still remember sitting by her hospital bed, holding her hand as she made me promise to live fully after she was gone. "Don't let the house become a shrine, Guy," she whispered. "It should be filled with life, not memories." I nodded, but keeping that promise proved harder than I anticipated. Our beach house in Clearwater, Florida, was our special place. We bought it 30 years ago when I completed my first major project, a 20-story office building in downtown Portland. The beach house wasn't extravagant, but it was perfect for us. A 2-story, 4-bedroom coastal cottage with weathered blue siding and white trim, situated just 200 yards from the Gulf of Mexico. The front porch faced west, giving us spectacular sunset views over the water. Margaret would sit there for hours, reading novels while I sketched new designs beside her. We spent every winter there after the kids grew up, escaping the harsh Maine weather. Margaret had grand plans for our retirement, talking about hosting family gatherings, starting a little garden in the backyard, and volunteering at the local library. The cancer diagnosis changed everything. After Margaret died, I couldn't bear to visit the beach house for almost 2 years. Too many memories, too much pain. I stayed in our primary home in Maine, a smaller colonial-style house that we'd purchased when the kids left for college. I turned the garage into a woodworking shop and threw myself into crafting furniture, something I'd always wanted to explore but never had time for during my busy career. My relationship with my children changed after Margaret's death. Jack, my 39-year-old son, called regularly and visited with his wife and 2 children whenever he could. Despite living in California, where he works as a software engineer, he made the effort to maintain our connection. Jack inherited Margaret's gentle nature and thoughtful approach to life. Amanda was different. My 42-year-old daughter had always been more like me, ambitious and determined. She worked as a real estate agent in Boston, building an impressive client list of high-end properties. Amanda had been close with Margaret, but after her mother's death, she became increasingly distant from me. Our conversations grew shorter and less frequent, often focused on practical matters rather than emotional connection. I noticed a shift in Amanda's attitude toward me about a year ago. Her questions became more focused on my finances, the properties I owned, and my retirement plans. At first, I thought she was just concerned about my well-being, but there was something in her tone that reminded me of how she spoke to clients rather than family. "Dad, have you thought about downsizing?" she asked during one of her rare visits. "That beach house must be a lot to maintain at your age." "I manage just fine," I told her. "I have a service that checks on it regularly, and I spend a couple months there each winter. But it sits empty most of the year," she pressed. "That's a waste of a valuable asset." I changed the subject, uncomfortable with her calculating approach to what Margaret and I had always considered a family treasure, not an investment. 6 months ago, I had a minor heart scare. Nothing serious, just elevated blood pressure and some chest pain that sent me to the emergency room. The doctors adjusted my medication and advised me to reduce stress. When Amanda found out, she immediately suggested selling the beach house. You need to think about assisted living options, Dad, she said, as if I were already incapacitated instead of a healthy, active man who still swam 3 times a week and walked 5 miles daily. Amanda, I'm not ready for that conversation, I responded firmly. And I don't intend to sell the beach house. She dropped the subject, but I sensed she wasn't satisfied with my answer. What I didn't realize then was how far she would go to get her way. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late September when I received that fateful call. I was in my workshop, sanding down a cherry wood dining table I was building for Jack's anniversary gift. Sawdust filled the air, catching the sunlight streaming through the windows. My phone buzzed on the workbench, and I wiped my hands on a cloth before answering. "Hello? Dad, it's Amanda." Her voice had that crisp, professional tone she used for business calls. No warmth, no "how are you?" Just straight to the point. "We're going tomorrow, Dad. I've sold your beach house." I nearly dropped the phone. My free hand gripped the edge of the workbench as I tried to process what she was saying. "You've done what?" I asked, keeping my voice steady despite the shock rippling through me. "The beach house in Clearwater. Jack and I have decided it's time to liquidate that asset. The market in Florida is hot right now, and we got an excellent offer, 30% above market value." The clinical way she described our family home, the place where Margaret and I had created so many memories, hit me like a physical blow. Asset, liquidate, market value, as if she were talking about stocks or bonds, not the house her mother had loved. "You're getting older, Dad," she continued, not waiting for my response. "We decided it's best to sell now before you need assisted living. The proceeds can be set aside for your care." My mind raced. How could she sell a house she didn't own? I was the sole owner since Margaret's death. Then it dawned on me. Amanda must have used her real estate connections to find a buyer and was now presenting it as a done deal, expecting me to go along with it. "I see," I said calmly, my architect's mind already analyzing the situation, looking for the structural weakness in her plan. "And when did you make this decision?" "Jack and I have been discussing it for months," she replied. "We're flying to Florida tomorrow to handle the paperwork. The buyers are eager to close quickly." That was a red flag. Jack and I had spoken just last week, and he hadn't mentioned anything about selling the beach house. Either Amanda was lying about his involvement, or she had somehow convinced him without telling me. "Amanda," I said, measuring my words carefully, "there's something important you've forgotten." "What are you talking about, Dad?" Her voice took on that patronizing tone she'd been using with me lately, as if I were a confused elderly man rather than her father. "You've forgotten something crucial about the beach house," I repeated, a sense of vindication beginning to build inside me. "But we can discuss that when you're in Florida." "There's nothing to discuss," she snapped. "Everything's arranged. I've been handling real estate for 15 years, Dad. I know what I'm doing." The buyers have already signed the preliminary agreement. After we hung up, I sat in my workshop, surrounded by the half-finished pieces of furniture that had become my therapy after Margaret died. The sawdust smell reminded me of my father's workshop, where I'd learned to build things with my hands long before I designed them with my mind. The shock gave way to a deep sense of betrayal. My own daughter had gone behind my back, attempting to sell my property without my consent. And she had somehow involved Jack, who had always been straightforward with me. I called Jack immediately. "Dad?" He sounded surprised to hear from me. "Is everything okay?" "Amanda just called me. She says you two are selling the beach house." There was a pause. "She told you already?" "I thought we were going to discuss it with you together after getting more information." So he was involved, but not as deeply as Amanda had implied. "Jack, did you agree to sell the house?" Another pause. "Amanda said we should look into options. She mentioned that you had been talking about selling it because the upkeep was becoming too much. I said we should consider what's best for you, but I never agreed to actually list it or find buyers." The pieces clicked into place. Amanda had manipulated Jack, just as she was trying to manipulate me. "Son, I never said anything about wanting to sell the beach house, and Amanda doesn't have the authority to sell it, regardless of what she's told these buyers." "Oh God," Jack said, his voice dropping. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I had no idea she was taking it this far. She made it sound like you were on board with this." After hanging up with Jack, I sat quietly, thinking about my next move. I could call Amanda back and confront her, but that would just lead to an argument where she would try to steamroll me with talk of my age and health. No, I needed to be smarter than that. I needed to take control of the situation. I wasn't going to be a victim in my own family's drama. Margaret would have expected more from me. It was time to act. 3 years ago, shortly after Margaret's first death anniversary, I scheduled a meeting with Thomas Blackwell, the attorney who had handled our affairs for decades. The grief was still raw, but I knew I needed to address the practical aspects of being a widower with significant assets. "Guy, good to see you," Thomas said as I entered his office in downtown Portland. The space was lined with law books and family photos, a testament to both his professional success and personal values. "How are you holding up?" "One day at a time," I replied, settling into the leather chair across from his desk. Margaret was always the one who pushed me to plan ahead. Seems only right I do that now. Thomas nodded sympathetically. He had known Margaret well, having been our friend as well as our lawyer for over 30 years. "What's on your mind today?" he asked, placing a legal pad in front of him. "I've been thinking about my estate. With Margaret gone, I want to make sure everything is properly arranged for Amanda and Jack." Thomas and I spent 2 hours discussing various options. As he explained the possibilities, one particular arrangement caught my attention. "Many of my clients with vacation properties set up revocable living trusts," Thomas explained. "It can offer protection from creditors, simplify the eventual transfer to your children, and give you tax advantages while maintaining complete control of the property during your lifetime." "A trust?" I asked, intrigued. "How would that work exactly?" "You'd transfer the property into the trust, with yourself as the trustee. You maintain full control over the property, can use it as you wish, sell it if you desire, or even remove it from the trust. But it creates a legal separation that can be beneficial in several ways." What Thomas said next was what ultimately convinced me. "Margaret mentioned her concerns about Amanda's husband's business troubles when we last updated your wills," he said carefully. I nodded. Amanda's husband Ryan had a history of risky business ventures that occasionally put their finances in jeopardy. Margaret had worried about what might happen if Amanda inherited property outright and it became entangled in her husband's financial problems. "A trust can include provisions that protect the beneficiaries from such situations," Thomas continued. "And it gives you the flexibility to adjust terms as circumstances change." 2 weeks later, I signed the paperwork creating the Harrington Family Beach Trust. The Clearwater property was transferred into the trust, with myself as the trustee and Amanda and Jack as equal beneficiaries after my death. I also included provisions about how the property could be used and transferred, specifically requiring unanimous consent from all beneficiaries for any sale. Since then, I had been paying the property taxes and maintenance costs through the trust account. The arrangement was perfectly legal and provided the protection Margaret had wanted for our children's inheritance. Amanda, with her real estate background, should have conducted a proper title search before attempting to sell the property. Had she done so, she would have discovered that the beach house was owned by the trust, not by me personally. After speaking with Jack, I called Thomas Blackwell again. "Thomas, I need your advice on an urgent matter." I explained the situation with Amanda and the beach house. "She can't sell the property," Thomas confirmed immediately. "Not without your signature as the trustee, and not without Jack's consent as specified in the trust documents. Any agreement she's made with buyers is essentially worthless." "What should I do?" I asked. "Document everything. If she's misrepresenting ownership to potential buyers, that's a serious ethical breach, especially given her profession. I'd suggest meeting her in Florida with the trust documents. You might want to contact your Florida attorney as well, just to have local representation if needed." After hanging up, I sat back in my chair, a mixture of emotions washing over me. There was a certain vindication in knowing that Amanda's scheme couldn't succeed legally. But there was also profound sadness that my daughter had attempted to sell my property behind my back, apparently willing to manipulate both her brother and me in the process. The beach house was more than just a property to me. It represented the life Margaret and I had built together, the dreams we had shared. Amanda knew that. Yet she had treated it as nothing more than a financial asset to be liquidated. I decided then that I needed to go to Florida immediately. I needed to confront Amanda in person with proof of the trust's existence and my authority as trustee. It wouldn't be a conversation I would enjoy, but it was necessary to protect what Margaret and I had built and to address the serious breach of trust within our family. I packed quickly, throwing a week's worth of clothes into a suitcase along with toiletries and medications. As I moved around my bedroom, gathering what I needed, I caught sight of the photo on my nightstand. Margaret smiling at the camera, her arm around Amanda at her college graduation. Both of them looked so happy, so connected. When had things changed so drastically between my daughter and our family? The drive to Portland International Jetport gave me time to reflect on my relationship with Amanda. She had always been determined, even as a child. I remembered her at 7 years old, insisting on building her own treehouse after Jack and I had constructed one together. She wouldn't accept help, struggling for days with hammer and nails until she had something resembling a platform in the old maple tree. It wasn't pretty, but it was hers, built through sheer, stubborn determination. That determination had served her well in her career, but somewhere along the way, it had hardened into something less admirable. Perhaps Margaret and I had contributed to that by admiring her drive without tempering it with enough emphasis on consideration for others. Had we inadvertently encouraged the very traits that now led her to believe she could make unilateral decisions about family property? The flight from Portland to Tampa was fully booked. I found myself seated next to an elderly woman with bright silver hair and vibrant blue eyes that crinkled when she smiled. "First time to Florida?" she asked as we buckled our seatbelts. "No, I have a beach house in Clearwater," I replied. "Been going there for 30 years. "How lovely," she said. "My husband and I had a place in Sarasota for decades. After he passed, my children wanted me to sell it, said it was too much for me to handle alone." I turned to look at her directly. "What did you do?" She chuckled. "Told them I'd think about it, then transferred ownership to my favorite charity in my will. Now they visit me there regularly, knowing it won't be theirs to sell when I'm gone." Her words struck me as both humorous and profound. "That's quite a solution," I said with a smile. "Family property brings out interesting behaviors in children," she observed. "Sometimes they need a reminder that parents are still capable of making their own decisions." By the time we landed in Tampa, I had gained not just a pleasant flight companion but also a fresh perspective on my situation. I rented a car at the airport and drove the familiar route to Clearwater. As I crossed the causeway, the azure waters of the Gulf stretched out on either side, pelicans diving for fish in the late afternoon Sunday. Despite the circumstances, I felt a sense of homecoming. This was my place, filled with memories of Margaret and our life together. Instead of going directly to the beach house, I checked into a small hotel a few blocks away. I didn't want to risk a premature confrontation with Amanda before I had everything in order. From my hotel room, I called Daniel Rosenthal, the attorney who handled our Florida legal matters. "Mr. Harrington, it's been a while," Daniel said when he took my call. "What brings you to Florida outside of winter season?" I explained the situation, and he agreed to meet me early the next morning. "Bring the trust documents," he advised. "We'll review everything to make sure you're properly prepared." After speaking with Daniel, I drove by the beach house, keeping a discreet distance. Sure enough, there was already a sold sign planted in the front yard. Seeing it there, on the property Margaret and I had loved, sent a spike of anger through me. The presumption was staggering. I parked down the street and watched for a while. No sign of Amanda yet, but I noticed a man in a suit showing the property to a middle-aged couple. Through some inquiries at local real estate offices, I discovered the man was Frank Powell, a prominent local realtor known for handling high-end beach properties. The next morning, I met with Daniel Rosenthal at his office. A meticulous man in his 60s with a reputation for thorough preparation, Daniel reviewed the trust documents carefully. "Everything is in order, Guy," he confirmed. "The property was properly transferred to the trust 3 years ago. All taxes have been paid through the trust account. There is absolutely no way your daughter can legally sell this property without your signature as trustee and without the consent provisions being met." "What about the buyers?" I asked. "They're innocent in all this. If they've paid any money, they'd have a claim against the person who misrepresented ownership, not against you or the trust," Daniel explained. "I suggest we prepare a formal notice that can be presented to all parties, clarifying the ownership situation." As Daniel prepared the necessary paperwork, I faced a moral dilemma. I could simply assert my legal rights, embarrassing Amanda in front of the buyers and the realtor. That would certainly teach her a lesson about going behind my back. But would it heal the rift between us, or only widen it? Margaret would have encouraged me to find a solution that addressed the breach of trust while leaving room for reconciliation. She had always been the peacemaker in our family, finding ways to correct behavior without destroying relationships. I decided to confront Amanda directly before taking any formal legal action. I wanted to give her a chance to explain herself and to understand the seriousness of what she had done. While waiting for Daniel to finish the paperwork, I called Jack. "Dad, I've been trying to reach Amanda since we spoke," he said, sounding stressed. "She's not taking my calls. I think she knows I talked to you." "I'm in Florida," I told him, "at the beach house." "You're what?" Jack sounded shocked. "Dad, I'm so sorry about all this. I had no idea she was actually trying to sell the house." "It's not your fault, son, but I think it would help if you were here too. This has become a family matter that needs all of us to resolve." Jack agreed to take the next available flight from San Francisco. Having him there would provide balance, preventing the confrontation from becoming just Amanda and me at odds with each other, as it had too often since Margaret died. As I hung up, I felt more confident about my approach. This wasn't just about asserting my legal rights. It was about addressing the deeper issues in our family and finding a way forward that honored Margaret's memory and the values she had tried to instill in all of us. The next morning dawned bright and clear, the kind of perfect Florida day that had made Margaret and me fall in love with Clearwater in the first place. I arrived at the beach house just before 10, parking my rental car directly behind a luxury SUV with Massachusetts plates that I recognized as Amanda's. Walking up the shell-lined path to the front door, I noticed fresh flowers had been placed on the porch, likely staged to impress the potential buyers. The SOLD sign stood proudly in the yard, a premature announcement of a transaction that could not legally take place. I didn't use my key to enter. Instead, I knocked on the door of my own house, an odd sensation that reinforced the surreal nature of the situation. Frank Powell, the realtor I had identified the day before, opened the door. His expression shifted from professional welcome to confusion as he took in my appearance. "Can I help you, sir?" he asked politely. "Yes, I believe you can. My name is Guy Harrington. This is my house." His eyes widened slightly, but before he could respond, Amanda appeared behind him. She was dressed in a sleek business suit, her hair pulled back in a professional style. For a moment, she looked so much like Margaret that it made my heart ache. "Dad?" The shock in her voice was evident. "What are you doing here?" "I came to see the house that's apparently being sold," I replied calmly. "May I come in?" Frank Powell stepped aside awkwardly, glancing between Amanda and me with growing discomfort. Inside, I could see a well-dressed couple sitting on the living room sofa, the same couple I had observed viewing the house the previous day. "Mr. Harrington, these are the Richardsons," Frank said, attempting to maintain professional composure. "They're, interested in the property." "I imagine they are," I said, smiling politely at the couple. "It's a beautiful home. My wife and I bought it 30 years ago." The Richardsons exchanged glances, clearly sensing that something was amiss. Amanda grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the kitchen. "Dad, what are you doing?" she hissed once we were out of earshot. "You're going to ruin everything." "I think we need to have a conversation about who has the right to sell this house," I said, keeping my voice level despite the anger simmering below the surface. "This isn't the time," she snapped. "The Richardsons are ready to make an offer above asking price. We can talk after they leave." "There won't be an offer, Amanda, because the house isn't for sale." Her eyes narrowed. "Dad, we've been through this. You're not thinking clearly about your future. At your age, with your health issues, you need to be practical about assets like this." "My health issues? You mean the elevated blood pressure that's completely controlled with medication? Or perhaps you're referring to the fact that I'm 68 and still swim half a mile 3 times a week?" She sighed with exaggerated patience. "You had a heart scare 6 months ago. The doctor said you need to reduce stress. This house sitting empty most of the year is a source of stress and expense." "Amanda," I said firmly, "I want to see the sales contract you're planning to present to the Richardsons." She hesitated, then walked over to her briefcase on the counter and pulled out a folder. "Fine. I've structured it to ensure you get the maximum benefit. The proceeds will be placed in a conservatively managed account for your future care needs." I took the folder and opened it, scanning the document inside. As I suspected, it listed me as the owner of the property, not the trust. "Did you conduct a title search before listing this property?" I asked, knowing full well she hadn't, or she would have discovered the truth. "Of course I did," she said, but her eyes flickered away briefly, a tell she'd had since childhood when she was lying. "And what did that search show about the current ownership of this property?" "Dad, stop with the 20 questions. You own this house. Mom left her half to you when she died. Now you're getting older, and Jack and I will inherit it eventually anyway. We're just being proactive about converting it to a more manageable asset for you." "Amanda, I need you to listen very carefully," I said, placing the contract back in the folder. "You cannot sell this house because you do not have the legal authority to do so. I am not the owner of this property, at least not in the way you think." Confusion crossed her face. "What are you talking about?" Before I could explain, Frank Powell appeared in the kitchen doorway. "Is everything all right? The Richardsons are wondering if we could proceed with discussing their offer." Amanda straightened her jacket and adopted her professional demeanor again. "Of course. We'll be right there." "Actually," I interjected, "there's been a misunderstanding that needs to be clarified first." I followed Frank back to the living room, with Amanda close behind me, practically radiating tension. The Richardsons looked up expectantly as we entered. "Mr. and Mrs. Richardson," I began, "I apologize for the awkward situation, but I need to inform you that there's a significant issue with the sale of this property." "Dad," Amanda cut in sharply, "this isn't necessary right now." I turned to her. "It absolutely is necessary. These people deserve to know the truth before they make an offer on a property that isn't available for sale." Frank Powell's professional smile faltered. "Perhaps we should clarify what's happening here." "Yes, let's do that," I agreed, reaching into my jacket pocket and pulling out the documents Daniel Rosenthal had prepared for me. 3 years ago, I transferred ownership of this property to the Harrington Family Beach Trust, of which I am the trustee. The trust agreement specifically states that the property cannot be sold without the unanimous consent of all beneficiaries, including myself and my son Jack, who is not present and has not consented to any sale. The room went silent. The Richardsons looked uncomfortable. Frank Powell appeared stunned, and Amanda's face drained of color. "Let me see that," she demanded, snatching the papers from my hand. As a real estate professional, she quickly grasped the implications of what she was reading. "If you'll excuse us," Frank said smoothly to the Richardsons, "it seems we need to address some family matters before proceeding. Perhaps we could reschedule our discussion for tomorrow?" The couple nodded, clearly relieved to have an excuse to exit the increasingly tense situation. Frank showed them out, promising to call them later. As soon as the door closed behind them, Amanda exploded. "You created a trust? Without telling me? How could you do that? How could I legally protect a family asset?" "Quite easily, as it turns out. The better question is, how could you try to sell property you don't own without conducting proper due diligence?" Frank Powell cleared his throat. "I think I should give you two some privacy to discuss this. Amanda, perhaps we should talk tomorrow about how to proceed." After the realtor left, Amanda and I were alone in the house, the tension between us palpable. "You never trusted me," she said, her voice shaking with anger. "That's what this is about. You never thought I was capable of making decisions about our family's future." "This has nothing to do with trust and everything to do with respect," I countered. "You didn't come to me with concerns or suggestions. You went behind my back, told me the house was sold as a fait accompli, and expected me to simply accept it." "Because I knew you'd be stubborn and emotional about it," she shouted. "You've been irrational about everything since Mom died. Keeping this place exactly as it was when she was alive, as if that somehow keeps her with you. It's not healthy, Dad." Her words hit a nerve, but I maintained my composure. "My emotional attachment to this house doesn't give you the right to make decisions about it without my input. And it certainly doesn't give you the right to misrepresent ownership to potential buyers." "I was trying to help you," she insisted, though her voice had less conviction now. "Before you end up needing care that drains all your savings. Before this place becomes a burden you can't manage. Did it ever occur to you to just talk to me? To express your concerns without taking action unilaterally? To treat me like a competent adult rather than an elderly person who needs decisions made for them?" She didn't respond, staring out the window at the Gulf waters visible beyond the neighboring houses. "You know what hurts the most, Amanda? Not that you wanted to sell the house, but that you were willing to manipulate Jack, lie to me, and potentially commit fraud to do it. That's not who your mother and I raised you to be. Don't bring Mom into this," she snapped, but tears had formed in her eyes. You have no idea what I've been dealing with. Then tell me, I said, softening my tone. Talk to me instead of going behind my back. But Amanda wasn't ready for that conversation. She grabbed her briefcase and headed for the door. I need some air. This isn't over, Dad. You can't just show up and derail everything I've been working on. Amanda, I called after her. Running away won't solve this. She paused at the door, her back to me. Neither will your trust or your moral high ground, she said bitterly. And then she was gone, the door slamming behind her. I stood alone in the beach house living room, surrounded by memories of happier times. The victory of stopping the unauthorized sale felt hollow in the face of the evident brokenness in my relationship with my daughter. Frank Powell called an hour later, profusely apologetic. Mr. Harrington, I had no idea about the trust situation. Amanda provided documents showing you as the sole owner. Had I known, I never would have proceeded with the listing. I understand, I told him. You were misled, as were the Richardsons. I'd appreciate it if you'd remove that sold sign from my yard. Of course, right away. Again, I'm terribly sorry for any inconvenience or distress this has caused. After hanging up, I walked through the house, touching familiar objects, looking at family photos on the walls. In our bedroom, Margaret's reading glasses still sat on the nightstand, exactly where she had left them during our last visit together before her diagnosis. I picked them up, feeling their lightness in my palm, and finally allowed myself to cry for all that had been lost. Not just my wife, but also the close family we had once been. I spent that night in the beach house, sleeping in the master bedroom for the first time since Margaret's death. The sound of waves through the open window was both comforting and melancholy, a reminder of countless nights we'd fallen asleep to that same rhythm. In the morning, I made coffee and took it out to the front porch, sitting in one of the Adirondack chairs Margaret and I had bought during our first year owning the house. The sold sign was gone from the yard, as Frank Powell had promised, but its absence didn't erase the reality of what had happened. Where had things gone so wrong with Amanda? As I sat watching the neighborhood come to life, dog walkers strolling past and early morning joggers on their way to the beach, I reflected on our family history. I remembered Amanda at 10, building elaborate sandcastles at the water's edge right in front of the house. Margaret teaching her how to brace them against the incoming tide, working together to construct moats and walls. The ocean always wins eventually, Margaret had told her. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't build beautiful things while we can. I thought of Amanda's high school graduation, how proud Margaret and I had been watching her accept her diploma, knowing she was headed to Boston University with a partial scholarship. We'd brought her to the beach house that summer, just the three of us, while Jack stayed with grandparents, a special trip to celebrate her achievement. When had that bright, ambitious girl turned into someone who would go behind my back to sell a family home? Had I missed signs over the years? Had I been too absorbed in my grief after Margaret died to notice changes in my daughter? My reflections were interrupted by the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. I looked up, expecting to see Amanda returning for another confrontation, but instead saw Jack stepping out of a rental car. "Dad," he called, walking up the path with a small overnight bag. He looked tired from the cross-country flight, but managed a smile as he climbed the porch steps. We embraced, and I felt a surge of gratitude for my son's steadfast presence. "Thanks for coming," I said. "It means a lot." "Of course," he replied, setting his bag down and taking the chair beside mine. "Have you spoken with Amanda since yesterday?" I shook my head. She stormed out after I revealed the trust situation. "I haven't heard from her." Jack sighed. "I finally got her to take my call last night. She's staying at a hotel in Clearwater Beach. She's pretty upset, Dad." "I imagine she is." Her plan fell apart rather spectacularly. "It's more than that," Jack said carefully. "There are things you don't know about Amanda's situation." I turned to face him directly. "What things?" Jack ran a hand through his hair, a gesture reminiscent of Margaret when she was troubled. "Ryan's business failed again about 8 months ago. Their financial situation is worse than you realize. They've been struggling to make mortgage payments on their house in Boston. Amanda didn't tell you because she was embarrassed." This news shifted my understanding of the situation. So selling this place wasn't just about my health or age, she needed the money. Jack nodded. "I think so, yes. She wouldn't admit it directly, but reading between the lines, they're in serious financial trouble." Ryan apparently took out loans against their house for his business venture, and now they're underwater on the mortgage. Why wouldn't she just come to me for help? I wondered aloud. I would have helped them if I'd known. You know Amanda. She's always been fiercely independent, unwilling to admit when she's struggling. I think she saw the beach house as a solution that would let her solve her problems without having to ask for help directly. She could frame it as doing what's best for you, rather than admitting she needed assistance. We sat in silence for a few minutes, watching a pelican dive into the water across the street. I didn't create the trust to keep the property from Amanda and you, I said finally. It was about protecting it for both of you, making sure it would always be a family place rather than something that could be lost to outside circumstances. I know that, Dad, Jack assured me. And I think deep down, Amanda knows it too. She's just too proud and desperate right now to admit it. We spent the morning walking along the beach, talking about our family, about Margaret, about the changes in all our lives since her death. Having Jack there gave me perspective I had been lacking, helping me see the situation with Amanda more compassionately. When we returned to the house, Jack went to shower and change while I made lunch. As I was setting out sandwiches on the patio table, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Ryan, Amanda's husband. Guy? It's Ryan. I hope it's okay that I'm calling. Of course, I said, surprised to hear from him. Ryan and I had always had a cordial but not particularly close relationship. Is everything all right? There was a pause before he answered. No, not really. Amanda told me what happened yesterday with the beach house. I wanted you to know that I had no idea she was doing that. I never would have approved of her trying to sell your property without your knowledge. I appreciate that, Ryan. Jack has filled me in on some of your financial difficulties. I wish you or Amanda had felt comfortable coming to me directly. Another pause. That's Amanda's pride. She didn't want you to know how badly I'd messed up again. My latest venture collapsed completely, and we're in serious trouble with the mortgage. She was trying to find a solution without having to admit the truth. Selling my house without my knowledge isn't a solution, I pointed out. I know, and I've told her that. I'm sorry, Guy, truly. Amanda's under tremendous stress, but that doesn't excuse what she tried to do. After the call ended, I sat thinking about what Ryan had shared. The picture becoming clearer now. Amanda hadn't just been making a power play or trying to control my life. She had been desperately trying to solve a problem without having to face the shame of admitting failure and asking for help. That evening, Jack and I were sitting on the front porch watching the sunset when I had an epiphany. Margaret had always said that the true value of the beach house wasn't in its monetary worth, but in the way it brought our family together. Right now, it was doing the opposite, driving us apart. I need to talk to Thomas and Daniel, I said to Jack. I have an idea that might help resolve this situation. The next morning I called both attorneys and explained what I wanted to do. They agreed to draft the necessary paperwork, which would be ready within a day. Are you sure about this, Dad? Jack asked when I told him my plan. You don't owe Amanda anything after what she tried to do. This isn't about owing or punishment, I explained. It's about finding a solution that addresses the real problem while preserving what matters most. It's what your mother would have done. Jack smiled. Mom always did find ways to solve problems without creating new ones. Exactly, I said. And I think it's time I started channeling a bit more of her wisdom. 2 days after the confrontation, I called Amanda and asked her to meet me at the beach house. Her initial response was guarded. Is this so you can lecture me some more about the trust and how I betrayed everyone? She asked. No. It's so we can talk like family and find a way forward, I replied. Jack will be here too. Please, Amanda. This is important. She agreed reluctantly. When she arrived that afternoon, her usual confident demeanor was subdued. She walked up the path slowly, looking as if she expected another confrontation. I met her on the porch. Thanks for coming, I said, holding the door open. There's fresh coffee inside. The three of us gathered on the back porch overlooking the small garden that led to the community beach access path. It was a spot Margaret had loved, where she would drink her morning coffee and watch the seabirds. An uncomfortable silence stretched between us until I finally spoke. Amanda, I want to start by saying that I understand now that there were financial pressures driving your actions. Ryan called me. She shot a glance at Jack, then looked down at her coffee cup. He shouldn't have done that. I'm glad he did, I said gently. It helps me understand why you felt so desperate to sell this place. I just wish you had felt able to come to me directly. "And say what?" she asked, her voice tight with emotion. "That my husband's latest business failure has left us nearly bankrupt? That we might lose our house? That after 15 years in real estate, I can't even keep my own financial house in order?" "Yes, exactly that," I said. "Because we're family, and families help each other through difficult times." Amanda looked away, blinking back tears. "You always made everything look so easy, Dad. You and Mom. The successful careers, the happy marriage, this beautiful place. I wanted you to be proud of me, not disappointed. I have never been disappointed in you, Amanda. Concerned sometimes, frustrated recently, but never disappointed." She wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. "I shouldn't have tried to sell the house behind your back. I know that was wrong. But I was desperate, and I convinced myself I was doing what was best for everyone. I understand desperation can make us do things we otherwise wouldn't," I acknowledged. "But trust is essential in a family. When you go behind someone's back, even with good intentions, you damage that trust." Jack, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "We all could have communicated better, especially after Mom died. I should have stayed more connected, been more aware of what was happening with both of you." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a folder containing the documents Thomas and Daniel had prepared for me. I've been thinking about what Margaret would want us to do in this situation. She always saw this house as more than just property. It was a place for our family to come together. Opening the folder, I laid out the papers on the table between us. I've had the trust amended. It now includes a provision to establish the beach house as a family rental property. Amanda looked confused. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means the house will remain in the trust, but we'll create a proper rental business. The property management company I already use will handle the day-to-day operations. The income will be distributed among the three of us, with 25% coming to me for my retirement needs and the remaining 75% split between you and Jack." I turned to a specific page and pointed to the relevant section. "Based on comparable properties and occupancy rates, the rental income should be substantial, especially during high season. Your share, Amanda, should help address your immediate financial concerns while providing ongoing income." Amanda stared at the document, then up at me. "You're giving us most of the rental income? After what I tried to do?" "I'm not giving you anything," I clarified. "I'm restructuring our family asset to benefit all of us. The house stays in the family, provides income, and remains available for our personal use during specified periods each year. It's a business arrangement that happens to be between family members." "Why would you do this?" Amanda asked quietly. "Because Margaret taught me that when faced with a problem, we should look for solutions that strengthen bonds rather than sever them. This arrangement addresses your financial needs, respects my attachment to the property, and preserves it for future generations of our family." Jack reached over and squeezed my shoulder. "It's a good solution, Dad. Mom would approve." Amanda was silent for a long moment, studying the documents. "This is more than I deserve," she finally said, her voice thick with emotion. "It's not about deserving," I told her. "It's about recognizing that we all make mistakes and finding a way forward that honors what matters most, which is our family." "I am so sorry," she said, tears flowing freely now. "For everything. For not being honest about our financial situation. For trying to sell the house. For treating you like you couldn't make your own decisions." "I know," I said simply. "And I'm sorry too, for not seeing how much you were struggling. For not creating an environment where you felt you could come to me for help." For the first time in years, Amanda allowed me to hold her as she cried, reminiscent of when she was a child coming to me with scraped knees or hurt feelings. Jack joined us, and for a moment, I felt Margaret's presence among us, approving of this step toward healing. The amended trust agreement required all three of us to sign, a symbolic act of commitment to this new arrangement and to rebuilding the trust that had been damaged. As we each took turns signing, I felt a weight lifting that I hadn't realized I'd been carrying since Margaret's death. 6 months later, we gathered at the beach house for Thanksgiving, our first major holiday there since Margaret died. The rental business was thriving, providing Amanda and Ryan with enough income to address their most pressing financial issues while they restructured their debt. Jack and his family had spent 2 weeks there during the summer, and I had made it my winter residence, finally fulfilling the retirement plan Margaret and I had envisioned. As we sat around the dining table, I looked at my family, seeing the positive changes that had emerged from what could have been a permanent fracture. Amanda and I had been talking weekly, rebuilding our relationship through honest communication. She had started seeing a therapist to address some of the perfectionism and pride that had led to her desperate actions, and was learning to be more vulnerable about her struggles. "I'd like to make a toast," I said, raising my glass. "To Margaret, who always believed that this house was more than walls and windows. It was a place for our family to come together, in good times and bad. I think she'd be proud of how we've honored that vision, even if we took a difficult path to get here." "To Mom?" Jack and Amanda said in unison, raising their glasses. Later that evening, I sat alone on the front porch, watching the sunset paint the Gulf waters in shades of orange and pink. I thought about how close we had come to losing not just the beach house, but our connection as a family. The property Amanda had tried to sell had ultimately become the vehicle for healing and growth. Life rarely follows the paths we expect. Sometimes it takes a crisis to reveal what truly matters and to show us new ways forward. The beach house that Amanda had seen as merely a financial asset had become something much more valuable, a foundation for rebuilding trust and understanding within our family. Have you ever faced a family conflict over property or inheritance? How did you resolve it? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Sometimes, the most difficult family challenges can lead to unexpected growth and healing. If you found value in my story, please hit the like button, subscribe to hear more life experiences, and share with someone who might be facing similar family struggles. Remember, it's never too late to rebuild trust and find solutions that bring people together rather than drive them apart. Thank you for listening, and I wish you wisdom and compassion in navigating your own family journeys.